Hello and welcome to New Directions East Asia 2021. This breakout session is entitled The Influence of Language Assessment Literacy on Learners' Attributional Tendencies, and the presenter is Mikiko Habu-Dixon. Mikiko is a PhD candidate in linguistics at Sophia University in Japan. She completed her MA at Teachers College, Columbia University, and she's currently based in New York, where she teaches the Japanese language at the New School. As this is a pre-recorded session, we will not be able to take any questions from the audience. However, if you would like to discuss this topic with your fellow attendees, feel free to start a conversation in the platform's discussion rooms. I hope you enjoy the session.
Hello, everyone. My name is Makiko Dixon. I am a PhD candidate at Sophia University in Tokyo. First of all, I would like to apologize for showing my recorded presentation. Due to unavoidable circumstances, I regret that I am unable to do my presentation live. But at the same time, I would love to show my great appreciation for coming to watch my presentation. The title of my presentation is The Influence of Language Assessment Literacy on Learners' Attributional Tendencies. I would like to share a small project that I worked on with Japanese college students. There were many things I mulled over until I decided to do this project about language assessment that focused on learners. Recent decades have seen a significant increase in the use of various types of language assessment in education since formative assessment and assessment for learning started to receive attention from scholars and teachers. Therefore, more language assessment methods have been developed and implemented, and more learners and teachers and assessment stakeholders have been subject to the consequences of assessment and testing. As a result, the impact and influence of assessment have become broader, deeper, and more consequential. However, many learners tend to feel helpless and show negative attitudes when they face tests in general and high-stakes tests in particular. Research into learned helplessness indicate that when people suffer repeated failure or punishment in testing, they eventually become passive and unmotivated. Studies on learners' test anxiety also show its negative effect on learners' academic achievement and intelligence test scores. There are several problems that have surfaced. First, despite learners' exhibition of test anxiety and negative attitudes towards tests, it seems that they do not get sufficient support. This problem underlines the importance of identifying their emotional problems. Attribution theory of motivation will help understand their psychology. Second, although learners are the primary beneficiary of test results, many of them do not seem to have enough knowledge and understandings in assessment and testing to make their learning more efficient and practical. This problem emphasizes the importance of learners' language assessment literacy. Also, to my knowledge, there's almost no study to seek a relationship between learners' attributional tendencies and their levels of language assessment literacy, and I thought it was worth looking into. Attribution theory is a psychological concept about how people explain the causes of an event or behavior. In educational contexts, learners are engaged in the learning environment due to a desire to develop causes of behaviors or events. Causes are defined as an individual's attributions. People tend to see cause and effect relationships even where there is none. When people experience desirable and undesirable outcomes, such as success and failure, they can attribute the cause to something specific, which in turn can lead to increased or decreased motivational behavior. Therefore, attribution theory holds that attributions for behaviors and outcomes ultimately help to shape emotional and behavioral responses. This process is called the attribution emotion behavior process. Learners are likely to explain their reasons for success or failure based upon three dimensions. 1. Internal or external. 2. Stable or unstable. And 3. Controllable or uncontrollable. An individual's locus of causality can be externally or internally influenced. For example, a learner who fails an exam may attribute their poor performance to an inherent lack of ability, an internal cause, whereas another learner may attribute the same poor performance to distractions from the noise in the neighborhood, an external cause. Individuals who have an internal locus of causality will more often attribute their success and failure to their ability and effort, while those with an external locus of causality will more often attribute their success and failure to task difficulty and luck. The second causal dimension examines the stability of the cause of an outcome. Stability is defined as the consistency of the relationship between the causal factor and the outcome of a behavior. Both ability and task difficulty are considered to be relative to a stable relationship between the causal factor and the behavior over time. Effort and luck are considered to be more unstable in nature, meaning that the strength of the relationship between the causal factor and behavior changes based upon the actual behavior. The third causal dimension is the ability of the individual to control the outcome of the behavior. A behavior can be controllable or uncontrollable by the individual. If a behavior is controllable, then the individual has the capability to influence the outcome of a task or behavior, whereas if a behavior is uncontrollable, the individual has limited or no capability to influence the outcome. The effect that the controllability of the behavior has is upon the individual's locus of causality and the stability of the behavior. Three dimensions of attribution suggest that helplessness is caused by attributions that are external and uncontrollable. Also, according to Russell, 1982, attributions for success are perceived as more internal, stable, and controllable. Therefore, in order to make learners' perceptions more positive towards testing, they need to attribute testing as more internally than externally caused, more stably than unstably caused, and more controllably than uncontrollably caused. Based on attribution theory, I hypothesized that developing language assessment literacy could be a method for learners to believe that tests can be internally, stably, controllably driven. Language assessment literacy, in short LAL, is generally viewed as knowledge of using assessment methods and applying suitable tools in an appropriate time that enables an individual to understand, assess, construct language tests, and analyze test data. Davies 2008 argues three components of LAL: knowledge, skills, and principles. Knowledge refers to the background knowledge of measurement and language learning, and skills refer to the ability of testing practices, while principles are concerned with understanding reasons for testing, proper use of language tests, and issues that entail ethics, fairness, and professionalism in testing. As attribution theory of motivation indicates the importance of learners' active involvement in nurturing LAA to determine their perceptions towards testing, so that learners may be able to develop their attribution tendencies for success to make the best use of testing. To do so, some forms of training opportunities are needed. Attribution retraining is a technique for improving motivation and enhancing accomplishment by modifying learners' beliefs and attitudes. If learners identify the causes of their achievement negatively, attributional retraining is designed to change counterproductive assumptions regarding learners' academic performance into motivation-sustaining explanations. As for LAL training, developing assessment literacy is a major area of interest within the field of assessment literacy. Some researchers have emphasized LAL training by establishing a framework of core competencies of language assessment. developing language testing textbooks, and developing online tutorial materials. Although most of those LAL training was designed for language teachers, training was designed hoping it would affect learners' motivation and performance through teachers. A good model of learning-oriented language assessment training will be needed as attributional retraining to enhance motivation and encourage achievement by changing how learners think about testing so that their beliefs work for their chances for success in the future. In my project, I wanted to look into the two questions here. First question is, what is the common attributes towards testing for Japanese college students? And the second question is, will Japanese college students gain attributions for success through LAL training/attribution retraining? The participants were 40 Japanese freshmen and sophomore students at the private university in Japan. Many of them experienced high-stakes tests to get into college. They were enrolled in English reading and writing courses that I taught. Their majors were either economics, history, or English literature. English courses are mandatory for them, and they need to take computerized assessment system for English communication in short CASEC tests twice a year. The scores of CASEC tests will be used for placement of English courses the following year. Therefore, most of the students take English courses and tests very seriously. Also, according to some students' feedback about English courses, they feel that English courses have many tests in general, as they have 4 mini tests for each chapter in the textbook, a midterm test, as well as the final test in one semester. This is the procedure of the project. First, I asked the students to report their confidence level in English tests, impressions about testing, and their reasons why they think they make English test scores. Next, I asked them to self-report their attributions using the revised causal dimension scale called CDS2, created by Macaulay, Duncan, and Russell, 1992. And as a treatment, the LAL tutorial was conducted as LAL attribution training. After the tutorial, the second CDS2 was conducted, and I asked them again to report their impressions about testing to see their changes in attribution and ask for their opinions about their LAL tutorial experience. The scale CDS2 was used to find out their attributional tendencies in language testing. They answered 12 questions, and the students circled one number from 1 to 9 that reflect their impressions or opinions of the cause of their performance in tests. Questions 1, 6, 9 are related with locus of causality. Questions 3, 7, 11 are about stability. Questions 2, 4, 10 are about personal controllability, and questions 5, 8, 12 are about external controllability. LAL tutorial was conducted as a method of LAL training and attribution retraining. The students read 10 assessment testing scenarios in school life that touch upon basic testing principles. The topics covered in the tutorial were test anxiety, purpose of testing, types of testing, test usefulness, and interpretations of test data. After reading each scenario, the students were asked to answer the question that depicts their belief in the scenario. After answering the question, an explanation of principles or practices that related to the scenario will be given to gain language assessment literacy and reinforce the right approach to testing in the future. I carefully picked up words and phrases in scenarios and explanations for the students who presumably had no experience in learning testing principles. The following is the scenario examples. Scenario 1 is about test anxiety. And this is the explanation about test anxiety and the diffusion exercise to lower their test anxiety. Scenario 3 is about types of testing. And this is the explanation about it. Scenario 6 is about the validity of tests. And this is the explanation about validity. These are the excerpts of students' impressions about testing before the tutorials was conducted. It can be seen that the comments were made in very general terms and were mostly negative. I divided the students into two groups, judging from their answers of the question, how confident are you generally when you take English tests? 27 students were labeled as confident and 13 as unconfident. The table shows the frequency of causal attributions. As the number of participants was small, which is one of the limitations of this project, it was difficult to find a pattern. However, what is noticeable was the most common attribution was internal, unstable, and controllable attribution, short-term effort, for both confident and unconfident students. This means that they feel successful or unsuccessful in tests whether or not they make effort in studying right before the test. Another discovery that should be noted is that more unconfident students say their attribution is external, unstable, controllable factor. This means that unconfident students tend to feel their success or failure in tests depending on whether they get help from others, such as friends, teachers, or parents. This table shows the result of CDS2 before and after the tutorial. Higher the number, the more internal, stable, and controllable their attribution is. Before the tutorial, their levels of stability and external controllability were very low for both unconfident and confident students. And it can be seen that confident students are more internal, stable, controllable in attributions than unconfident students. After the tutorial, as shown in bold numbers, the students became more internal, confident, and controllable. However, confident students' personal controllability have slightly lowered as highlighted in red. After reading the students' feedback about the tutorial, a lot of them mentioned the teacher's important role as assessors, as the question regarding personal controllability reflect their personal aspects in depth. This is only my guess, but they might have felt more obligated to follow what teachers do after the tutorial. And as highlighted in blue, the changes are more apparent for unconfident students in all four types of attributions than confident students. I would like to introduce excerpts from the students' impressions about testing after the tutorial. By comparing the comments before the tutorial, it is obvious that changes took place in students' views about testing. They started to use testing terminology and consider the test beyond scores and grades. These are some comments from the students about LAL tutorial experience. Overall, I saw positive opinions about LAL tutorial. Some of them mentioned a specific proficiency test. They started to see tests from teachers' viewpoints, praise their effort, and the importance of making English learning more practical through assessment and testing. However, I would also like to take the comments below into consideration to cover the faults of this research and for the future of research. The words they used, such that similar to embarrassment or motivation and lack of teacher support on understanding, could lead to looking into learners' psychology in testing situations more in depth and the quality of pre- and in-service teachers' assessment training. As a conclusion, I would like to share the results of this project and future directions. In the pre-tutorial stage, the students generally report a negative attitude towards testing. The most common reported attribute was internal, unstable, controllable, short-term effort for both confident and unconfident students. Unconfident students tend to rely more on external, unstable, controllable attribute, help from others, than confident students. In the post-tutorial stage, overall, the students became more internal, stable, and controllable in tests, except for the confident students' personal controllability. The changes in attribution tendencies were more apparent in unconfident students than in confident students. And the students gained more positive views about testing after the tutorial. To emphasize the importance, the future of learners, LAL, and their attributional tendencies, obviously, more large-scale studies with many participants from different backgrounds and variables are needed to make the results and findings more generalizable. To make the research more productive, the content and the procedure of LAA training and attribution retraining should be examined more to be more relevant to the purpose of finding the relationship between learners' attributional tendencies and LAL levels. Also, the comments from the students depicted the importance of attributional training and LAL training for both learners and teachers to make teaching and learning more efficiently and effectively. Additionally, although changes in learners' attributional tendencies might be seen in this project, any change in their actual behavior before, during, and after testing procedure should be examined to validate the result of the study. Despite these limitations, I hope that outcomes of this project will make a contribution to raise awareness of learners' language assessment literacy and attributional tendencies. I am looking forward to getting your questions or feedback. Thank you so much again, and have a great day.
Thank you, Mikiko, for that thought-provoking presentation. That brings us to the end of this session. Please leave us some feedback on this particular session by answering the 2 short survey questions you can now see on your screen. Thank you for attending, and I hope you continue to enjoy the rest of the conference. Goodbye.